Hey guys, Zen Cop here, back again. I just finished up my 10th blog post, and as I stated previously, all of the video blog stuff that I do is going to mirror what I post on the blog. Just easier for me to sort of follow the verbiage so I can meet people on both sides. But I think that for most of you guys who are listening, it kind of feels like most people enjoy the video blog more than the writing. But either way, so again, thanks for listening and being here. This will probably be my last video blog on my phone. I pulled the trigger on some podcast equipment that will be a little bit better quality and the audio and all that stuff. It's just a matter of me trying to figure out how to work it and how to use it. Shouldn't be too hard, but I'm excited about that. Today I wanted to talk about risk and risk in the arena of public safety. And again, this is going to be geared more towards cops, but I think anyone could listen to this and take something away if you are in a career field that involves, I guess, some type of public service or any entity that is sort of an in-demand 24/7 type deal. And in the arena of public safety, there are many risks that come with that job. And a lot of people would assume that the highest risk comes from our day-to-day interactions with the worst parts of society. And that may be true, but I would argue we are far more successful in those endeavors than we are not. And good training and quality cops negates any issues involving violence or potential of even death. And the real risk comes from a variety of other avenues that more times than not we don't recognize as actual threats, but just part of the job, if you will. And one of the biggest elements of risk involves the agency itself. And this is probably the least recognized risk in law enforcement, but without question, it can be the most dangerous depending on the agency. And like I said earlier, any career field that operates on a 24/7, 365 calendar is the most vulnerable for losing control, and then also expected to keep going regardless of cost cutting, manpower, and circumstances. And the old term, shit rolls downhill. In those scenarios, it kind of turns into a game of a shitty hot potato where everyone has their own shit to deal with and there's not enough hands to take control. And when your agency becomes tested, and sometimes in the most horrific ways possible, I assure you, and someday that will happen to you and your agency, that will be a true measure of the risk that they choose to take on with ruthless regard, or they choose to navigate with poise, tactics, and resolve. I have had the unpleasant experience of watching a few tragic events unfold where control was not on the table for the first hour. And unfortunately, in those scenarios, there is never any true control at the beginning. It's the time after the dust settles where it actually starts to count. And even with great cops operating on good tactics and training, there is very little room to have a complete and total leg up in a unforgiving circumstance. However, I am proud to say that the long-term portion of those events at my agency were handled with complete control and complete care for those who were involved and also the community. But I'd be lying if I said that the first hour was not like trying to control an elephant with a dental floss lasso. Kind of let that picture float around in your head. Trying to get an elephant under control with a piece of dental floss. Kind of what that translates into. Could be a cool sticker. But when all is said and done, and life resumes as the new normal, there is still risk on the table. And the risk that becomes harder to see and harder to talk about, that's the real serious risk when life resumes to that new normal. The event itself is over, but many people are still a very long way away from being okay. A few years ago, a deputy from my agency was shot and killed during a very tragic investigation involving a cartel marijuana grow. It happened very early in the morning. And as the day turned into, normal business hours, it was very interesting to see the reactions from everyone as they found out. Reactions from people who were not either part of the incident or who otherwise just non-sworn. And they didn't have access to the radio or computer system that would, allow them to see and hear any updates. So a lot of those people just walked into work thinking it was a normal day. And that morning, I can remember very distinctly hearing a woman scream in the hallway as she entered the upstairs portion of the building where our office is. And she worked in payroll. Over the years, we said hello to each other in the hallway. That was about it. But I remember as I walked towards her, I didn't even know her name. And then suddenly we were family at that point where, I just sort of had that strange connection. And as the morning went on, I heard more screaming and more crying. And selfishly, I assumed that his death would mostly affect the fellow cops in the agency. And I couldn't have been more wrong. That day I learned that sometimes the people who are the most removed from the job itself are often the ones who will be the most affected. And those who live this job as a reality at the time, they will be the least affected. The long-term effects of these scenarios can introduce risk on a very chaotic level. Even scarier than that is the risk will not be something that you can readily identify. And that can be kind of scary. But the more exposure you have over the years, the more risk is stacked against you. And even for those who use those famous words, it doesn't affect me, they are also at risk for exposure. It may not affect them at the moment or even in the long term, but our brains have a really interesting way of ensuring that you never forget those horrible things. And mark my words, they will find a way to manifest themselves into a version of reality that you will have to negotiate at some point in your life. It's the mental aftermath of those incidents that will eventually kill us from the inside out. It's a really rotten interior that will begin to fester, and over time it will slowly kill us if we're not careful. And considering the risks on the table overall, if we were to explore the ethical and moral responsibilities of our agencies, are they actually taking care of us, or are they doing just enough to ensure that you can keep going despite the obvious signs that you should not be? Are their concerns relevant to you as a person, or relevant to you still being able to come to work? And in law enforcement, we are told constantly that we are part of a big family, a family who cares about each other, a family who looks out for each other, and a family who will always be there for you. But how many times have you felt like you get a big hug, but that hug is nothing more than to simply lift you back up on your feet and push you back into that patrol car? How many times has your administration listened to your concerns with one ear, almost like a kid talking to their parents as they're paying the bills? I mean, how many times have you tried to say you need help and the words don't make it to your tongue? Are you afraid to say them, or are you afraid that no one will hear them? Any way you slice it, there's a reason why those words remain a thought rather than an action. And in the realm of supervision, leadership roles, they require sort of a removal of your old reality in the process. And we can get a new assignment, especially if it involves a promotion. We take on new responsibilities, and that comes with a whole new perspective on a position that you once believed that you knew everything about. And the things that were once a concern from a patrol level in your eyes, they're now not that big of a deal because you've graduated to this whole new level of problems that you thought you understood, but you didn't. And the same scenario can be applied to any movement that is, new or otherwise unfamiliar to you. But what's so important in that scenario is to remember what it was like when you were in that role previously, and the concerns that you had and why you had those concerns. Were they gripes or were they actually problems? Were they problems with resolutions or were they simply things that couldn't be changed? And did you receive the attention needed for those gripes or problems, or were you brushed off, told it was being worked on, only to learn later on that the conversation you had with that person was as far as it went? Given the constant changes in this job, it's very important to remember what life was like when you were there and what life is like now. And the only real way to do that is to talk to the boots currently on the ground. And communication is the only real life source for change in law enforcement. And if you don't have that, create it. If you try to create it and it's a one-way conversation, then maybe it's time to start talking to other agencies. And after thinking about all of this, it's almost as if the agency itself can provide more risk than anything else in our careers. And that being said, a word of caution for those thinking about change, and I mean this with every fiber of my being. You will never find perfection in this career field. It simply does not exist. There will be weeds in every yard, some more than others. Agony is relative, and so is perspective. And if there are things within your agency that you can help change them. If you're complaining and not trying to be part of that change, well, congratulations, you're now part of the problem. And if your expectations are unreasonable, make them reasonable and reasonable within that agency. If you don't do that, you're screaming at a wall. And lastly, if you think you are irreplaceable, you are wrong. You couldn't be more wrong. And I'm not saying that the performance from the new guy who fills your boots will be comparable to what you were capable of, but they will fly your position as now available before they buy you a plaque. And little did we all know that when we signed up for this job, we were entering one of the most cutthroat industries in existence, and not by nature, but by design. And as long as evil exists in this world, there will be an expectation from the public that someone will come, whether it's you, me, or the next guy. There's much to be said right now about the current climate of law enforcement, and it sort of covers a pretty wide gamut of, the new guys, the guys who have been here for a while, and the guys who are on their way out. Each of us experiencing our own version of where am I now. And for the majority of us who are in that middle phase of life where we're not quite near retirement, but we're also not new, it's weird because we've watched everything change so much in the past decade. And this new generation has been thrown into this, pendulum swing, and they're not digging it, and rightfully so. But this is the only perspective they have. Meanwhile, you have your guys who are mentally checked out, retiring early, and rightfully so. I would do the same thing if I was in their position. But it's a matter of trying to find a balance wherever you are in this career. And balance is the key word. And I think communication and control are the other two that you should try to capitalize on if you have the opportunity. Guys, thank you so much for listening. You can follow me on Instagram at the Zen Cop, TheZencop, or on YouTube, the Zen Cop. Same thing. If you're on YouTube, well, you're here now. Twitter, I don't really do much. I don't really tweet, but I'm on there too. Thanks for listening. With the new equipment coming, I'm going to have some pretty cool stuff. The first official new equipment podcast will be pretty neat. I'm really excited about it, and I hope you guys like it. Again, thank you so much for listening, and have a great week. Talk to you guys next time.